Thanks very much for the introduction, Hannah. I'm really pleased to be here. Giving public talks is a rather new experience for me. You'll probably tell as I'm going through, it's something that I feel rather passionate about. And as I'm sure all of you will be, probably not because I'm selling the ideas, but just because a lot of them are very instinctive and you'll be familiar with some of the things, some of the concepts that I'll be talking about. So yeah, I will just share my screen and hope it's going to, okay. And now everyone's disappeared. Let me just move my screen around a little bit. Okay, hello. Okay, yeah, so yeah, I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you very much for having me. So I'll introduce myself first of all. So I'm coming from the Cambridge Doughnut Economics Action Group. We call ourselves CAMDIAG. We are the group, the action group behind the making of the Cambridge Doughnut. You'll discover what that means later. So a few words about me, and it will probably understand my style a little bit more. I was a goth as a teenager, but I was much too smiley. I make web applications for a living. And so I'm a user experience designer and web developer. I work with complex systems. I like them. I generally love technology and I like helping others use technology to make their lives better. Humans are in the center of everything. I'm a mum of two boys, as philosopher Roman Kusnarek, whom you might have read, says, I want to be a good ancestor. This all has started me thinking more about long-term goals and thinking more on generations and the generations to come. I'm not an economist. I like to think that I'm a citizen's economist, a citizen economist. I've not been formally trained in economics, but I have an appetite for learning and learning about the green economy. Many folks took up knitting or baking sourdough bread during the lockdown, and I binged on the writing of Karl Marx, Naomi Klein, Donella Williams, and of course, Kate Raworth. Much of it, I must admit, was by audiobook during sleepless nights. About Cambridge Doughnut. So it was started as a group by a few folks who were reading Raworth's book earlier this year as part of a book club in the University of the Third Age. I don't think you can really read a book like this without thinking, well, what are we going to do about it? The group has pulled membership and support from various different sources in Cambridge and has been rapidly growing since the summer. It's a mixture of organic growth and also through concerted social media campaigns and websites. All of our members know this to be a really important thing to do right now. We also welcome new members, and I'll share all the links at the end. So in this presentation, it's going to be very whistle stop. I'm going to introduce a little bit of the Doughnut economics. I would insist that if you are interested in anything that I talk about, do read the book. There are plenty of videos to watch and plenty of summaries. So I can only touch on things. So I'm going to do a very basic introduction. Then I'm going to talk about the downscaling of Doughnut economics to the scale of the city and the creation of the city portrait. And then I'm going to talk about Cambridge itself and the city portrait that we're making. Then I'm going to talk about our group, CAMDIAG, and possibly where we are going next. So this is a quote. This isn't Kate Rayworth, but this is Andre Gide. Everything that needs to be said has already been said, but since no one was listening, everything must be said again. So I think Rayworth would be the first to acknowledge that she's not inventing any of these ideas. The book is very well footnoted. She is providing a very good brand, some visualization and reframing of the ideas so that they can be understood very easily. You will probably feel that there's a lot of similarity. In fact, she quotes directly Donella Williams and many feminist and green economists and environmental scientists. And even the forefathers of the liberal capitalist economy. She quotes, they had a more holistic view of the economy than we currently have. So I'm not going to dwell on this, but at the heart of mainstream economics, we have a very, very simplified view of what the economy is, and a very simplified view of the person that's at the heart of economic theory. So you have a Homo economicus, who is always selfish, always rational, wants to pay the best price for things, never thinks of anything else, always has all of the information to hand that he needs to make proper decisions about things. Everything is rational, doesn't consider the implications of anything, will want to get the best price. Now, as we know, that's not the full theory. That's not the full picture of what a human is. It's very, very simple. It is only a model. And then on the right, you'll see a very simple model that Homo economicus is part of. The supply and demand. You have going horizontally and going upwards. You have supply. You have supply that goes up and up and up, and then you have price that goes, down and down and down and down. And then where they meet is the price that Homo economicus wants to pay. Which is where price matches supply, and it's the point of market equilibrium. As you can see, it's quite simple. And there are many, many problems with this model and many of the models in mainstream economic theory. I'm not going to dwell on it because the book will do a lot better than I can with describing the problems with it. So I'm going to cheat a little bit, and I'm going to play a video from Kate Rayworth herself, who will introduce some of the basics of doughnut economics, and then we'll go back and talk some more in depth about the visualization. Oh, hang on. I don't know if we didn't actually check sound. So if I play this, can you nod, Hannah, if you can hear it?
Hello, I'm Kate Rayworth, and I want to introduce you to the one doughnut that actually turns out to be good for us and good for cities that want to thrive in the 21st century. Because this century has begun with repeated global shocks, from financial meltdown and rocketing food prices in 2008, in the midst of climate breakdown, and most recently the duress of COVID lockdown. These impacts are hitting people with sharp inequalities of race and gender, of wealth and power, global north and global south. And what these repeated crises tell us is that we're deeply interconnected with each other and with the rest of the living world. That the crises that are emerging are actually resulting from the very systems that we've created. And that these shocks are deeply disruptive to human well-being, destructive of our collective resilience, and for many are an existential risk. So we urgently need a new vision of progress that is fit for the century ahead of us. And so I offer you a doughnut. Think of it as a compass for human prosperity in the 21st century. And the goal here is to leave nobody falling short in the hole in the middle of the donut, falling short on the essentials of life, like food, water, healthcare, housing, political voice, social equality. So get everybody over the social foundation into the green ring of the donut itself. But at the same time, don't overshoot its ecological ceiling, because there we put so much pressure on the life-supporting systems of this delicately balanced planet that we push her out of balance. We cause climate breakdown. We acidify the oceans. We create a hole in the ozone layer and critical loss of biodiversity and ecosystems. And these 9 planetary boundaries are what Earth system scientists believe hold this one habitable planet in the universe in such a benevolent state for humanity. So the aim is to meet the needs of all people within the means of the living planet. Hello, I'm Kate Rayworth.
So here are the planetary boundaries. The planetary boundary by Will Stefan and about 24 co-authors. It's a highly influential paper. It's well worth a read. It aims to define the environmental limits within which humanity can safely operate. They identify 3 boundaries: climate change, rate of biodiversity loss, and changes to global nitrogen cycle that may push the Earth system into a new state if crossed, and that also have pervasive influence on the remaining boundaries. Catastrophic change on a global or continental scale will be the outcome. We are actually overstepping around 5 of these boundaries already. By 2050, the UK government has signed in, like in 2019, they signed in that we must reach net zero carbon in the UK. So that's UK law. So that's great, isn't it? But we're nowhere near the targets. We are nowhere near where we need to be. It's only 30 years from now, and we need to start doing things now. So there's the planetary boundaries. So what about the social foundation, the inner bits of the donut? So the social foundation, as Kate Rayworth puts it, are built on the UN Sustainable Development Goals, such as health, food, social equity, or education. Every member of the UN has agreed to meet these by 2030. What happens if they don't? Don't know, really. They're not mapping one-to-one. Kate in the donut has 12 categories instead of 17. And as soon as you start looking at these sustainability goals, you kind of see that there might be a few problems in that we start hitting planetary boundaries if we actually have economic growth in every nation and every person. So yeah, that there are lots of things that are slightly problematic. We really need to look at the whole thing, both boundaries overlapping each other. So ecological ceiling around the outside, those planetary boundaries, social foundation on the inside, and of course it looks a bit like a donut. So in between those 2 boundaries is the safe and just space for humanity. So transgression of the ecological ceiling, you risk catastrophic change to life support system on which everybody relies. And we have far-reaching effects for all the generations. Transgression of the social foundations means millions of people do not have what they need for a good life. Anything outside of the green, lovely area in the middle is not sustainable. So there's been an attempt by Leeds University to actually model the economy and the environmental metrics from many countries in the world. And it's really quite fun. I'll share the links at the end. I'll probably share these slides, and you can click this link. You can compare the UK's portrait with Sri Lanka, for instance, and you can kind of see where they are with the boundaries. So what Kate does really well, I think, is replace the simple diagrams with, again, simple diagrams, very visual, but they're more expansive. So yeah, instead of thinking about GDP, we're thinking about the donut. We're thinking about those existential threats, and we're thinking about meeting everybody's needs, and so on. I'm going to share these slides because there's a lot here. So now I'm going to go, oh yeah, okay. So if you think about, you know, so we've already agreed, the UN, and agreed as a government, what can local councils do? Well, Kate Rayworth and the Doughnut Economics Action Lab has done a really good job at creating some tools for people to use. Really, if we're going to have change, we need to change at a more local level. There are many local authorities that are already thinking about the donut. Amsterdam is the most famous. Back in May, they released their report, which is well worth the read. Brussels are doing some thinking. Berlin, Cornwall are using a sustainability wheel for their development planning, and they have green ambassadors embedded in each of their committees. So everything is supposed to be, you know, to do with sustainability and thinking about the donut. There are many more case studies. So what I'm saying is this isn't a really outlandish pie in the sky stuff. We actually do need to think about this, and there are people that are already thinking about this. So now I'm going to talk about Cambridge. So I prepared these slides for people that weren't from Cambridge. So yeah, some of these you'll know about, but so Cambridge, I love being here. I've lived here for most of my life. You can get around Cambridge by bicycle. It's leafy and green. Buildings of Cambridge are very pretty. But in 2017, this idyllic place, 2017, 47 deaths in Cambridge, or 5.6 of all deaths, could be attributed to particulate air pollution, most likely caused by emissions from diesel engines and stationary traffic in and around the city. Cambridge has one of the fastest growing economies and populations in Britain, with 22% increase in population predicted between 2010 and 2031. There's been a building boom, with many greenfield sites built over to provide housing and workspaces for these new industries. So why is it that some people have struggled to feed themselves over the last 6 months during the COVID crisis, traveling across town to queue up for one of the many food hubs for well over an hour at a time? And why is it that many people who grew up in Cambridge can't afford to live here anymore? It's prosperous for some. And then, of course, there are some things that we can't really easily buy our way out of, no matter how prosperous our local economy is. Too little water. The growing demand to support Cambridge's incredible growth is putting pressure on the chalk streams in the aquifer. Among many terrible effects, it impacts biodiversity in our area. Too much water. Land and property in and around Cambridge will be underwater or flooding more regularly in just a few decades, with rising sea levels and the changing climate. Plenty of people here know just how fragile they are, socially and environmentally. We just need to find each other and turn from potential despair to transformative action. Have a project to crystallize our efforts around. So some of these organizations you might be members of, you might have interacted with them without using perhaps the language of donut economics, the donut. There are so many regenerative projects here in Cambridge focusing on moving the city into the sweet spot of a safe and just space for humanity. So we in CamDiag have seen that the donut model provides greater visibility and interconnectedness for the groups within this complex system. Cambridge is very ready for the Cambridge Doughnut. There are folks in the district council and planning bodies who talk about donut principles, having read Kate Rayworth's book. We are leveraging the effort of many other really good community groups and hope to find the common ground to amplify and support each other. So CamDiag has grown from a handful of individuals in the summer to well over 40 or 50 members. Some incredibly strong, dedicated people who are really moving things forward. We're the team that wants to build the portrait, the tools, making the connection, liaising between all of the different actors that are involved in regenerative action, and also the decision makers. As an organization, we're doctors, artists, academics, entrepreneurs, teachers, and engineers. Some have never been involved in community action, and some are seasoned activists. We're young people, parents and grandparents. A mix of ages and perspectives makes us a really strong group, and I'm hopeful for what we can do. There are challenges, sure, and collective group decisions are hard. We're plugging and connecting with communities directly where we can, and going by way of other organizations when we can't. So we are facing a crisis. Climate change is a crisis, and also snowballing inequality. Mutual aid groups spring into existence, as they often do in the face of crises, to fill in the gaps. COVID-19 pandemic was a crisis. Many of us have experienced the creative power of mutual aid groups from the inside, and this is where the energy of our group comes from, and the fire. So we're all digital. Everyone works online now. Many of you will be working online. Online tools allow us to collaborate, communicate, and move fast. Some tools are new for many people in the group, but we're putting in the time and the support to help and ensure everyone has access. As we strive for equity for all people in Cambridge, so naturally we strive for it in our group. We're emergent. It's a non-hierarchical organization. Everyone is free to create working groups around an issue that interests them. Many of our members have other associations and connections. As we come out of lockdown and restrictions are loosened, we're preparing to engage in the community and physical space. We're planning some exciting collaborations with artists working in the community, ready to roll up with pop-up conversation stands in the city or our donut stops. So art is very important. So we hope that we're going to be creating some assets that will be really useful for people. One of them is the Digital Doughnut, which will be an online tool for exploring our city portrait. And it will be, you could log in as a resident, you could log in as the local authority, SMEs. Various people will want to dice and slice the portrait in different ways and explore all the metrics. And it will also be bringing in not just the data, but also stories and sound files and interviews and things like that. So it's quite an ambitious project. So why is this useful? Well, in different parts of Cambridge, many people have very different experiences and challenges. The 10 most deprived areas in Cambridge are in the north and northeast of the city, and some are rated in the UK's 10% most deprived. There's plenty of data already collected by the councils. Could they feed into the donut too? Perhaps a city portrait is not granular enough. We want to know what's going on lower down within wards inside the communities. So working with various groups like the mutual aid groups that started under COVID-19, we want to provide resilience. The mutual aid groups providing resilience during COVID-19, and working with district and county councils. We want to really leverage and move with the community. The district and county councils really found that the mutual aid groups, like stuff that was coming from the community, was really powerful, and it meant that everybody got what they needed during some very, very troubling times, especially the first lockdown. It took a lot of people by surprise. So they gave support to the mutual aid groups, who in turn supported the community, and it was an amazingly successful program. We kind of understand that the transformation of Cambridge really does have to come from the community. No one's going to do this for us. With the best will in the world, local authorities still won't be able to do anything. There really needs to be a massive demand in the community, and they need to be held to account. So we've also, in Cambridge, as you probably know, there is a very, very powerful property development and business lobby. And when we come out of the COVID crisis, where everybody gets their vaccine or whatever, there is going to be a massive desire for local councils to go back onto track of growth, GDP centered economy, because what they fear a lot is market stagnation or even degrowth. And really, when you're talking about environmental and social boundaries, we kind of need to look at that. What is it? Do we need growth to thrive? But we do know that we have allies in the district and county councils. Councillor Katie Thornborough uses UN sustainability goals to set her priorities. And Doughnut economics in Cambridge City Council has been accepted in principle by the Executive Committee. That is not the same as accepting the Doughnut economics principles. Yeah, I think we've still got some way to go. The focus really is COVID right now, and of course Brexit, and all the economic shocks ahead. So yeah, we have some really tough times ahead here in Cambridge and the rest of the UK. The Doughnut model is a really good tool. It makes visible the efforts of all the many players that make up the economy. We're really excited about the possibilities, and everyone can be given the tools to understand their part of the portrait and what they can do to make Cambridge a place where everyone thrives and respects planetary and ultimately existential boundaries. It's times like this that brave and radical thinking is needed. Perhaps instead of saying we can't afford this transformation to the Doughnut economy, we say we can't afford not to. So I want to end my talk on this slide, which is one of the primary tools of the city portrait methodology, is the lenses, the 4 lenses. So you can look at Cambridge through the local social lens, the local ecological lens, the global social lens, and the global ecological lens. And by doing that, you can kind of unpack a whole bunch of stories and a new way of seeing what the place is that we're living in. So roughly it translates, and I'm just going to read them out. I'm hoping that maybe as people are going into their breakout rooms, maybe it will be some food for discussion. The local social lens is, what would it mean for the people of Cambridge to thrive? I mean, this isn't just some people in Cambridge, but everyone in Cambridge. We know that this is a very unequal place. We know that so many people have had to use the food hubs and the food banks, and really struggling right now. And it's probably going to get worse. But what does it mean if everybody in Cambridge thrive? What does that mean? The local ecological lens. What would it mean for Cambridge to thrive within its natural habitat? So we probably all know about the demands on water here and green spaces, but mainly let's just look at water. It's a very important thing that life depends on. But what does it mean? Can we sustain the growth in Cambridge? Or is there a way that maybe we can adopt certain behaviors that means that Cambridge can exist within its natural habitat? So the global social lens, what would it mean for Cambridge to respect the well-being of people worldwide? We all know our consumer habits do have an impact on people's well-being all over the world. And what would it mean if we respected them too? The global ecological lens, what would it mean for Cambridge to respect the health of the whole planet? So reducing carbon emissions is one thing, but what about all of those other things that we're doing that affects the health of the whole planet? So those are the lenses, and they're a primary asset for the city portrait of donut economics. So I'm hoping that that will be food for thought for the next part. So thank you very much.